Hi, my name is Trixie, and I will tell you why I'd like to move to the other side of our planet. I'm not really a fan of winter and snow, so I've always wanted to move from my northern state to someplace warmer when I grow up. But I hadn't even finished school when I first traveled to the country where you could celebrate Christmas on the beach wearing a bikini. This all happened because my father got a temporary job assignment in Australia. I did my best to convince my parents to take me along. The only thing that was bad was that my mother was so busy with her business project that she couldn't travel with us. So my father and I crossed half the planet, and I was looking forward to my new life. The school year in Australia starts several months later than in the U.S., so I was planning to spend all my extra leisure time at the beach. Dad worked hard, and I was left most of the time on my own. But I wasn't afraid. I was already 15, basically all grown up. Also, my father told me that if I had any problems, I could ask for our neighbor Courtney's help. Well, my adventures in Australia began, and the first problems came from where they were least expected, the supermarket. I went shopping for some food, got everything I needed, and went to the counter with cash in my pocket. A nice cashier talked to me amicably, and I did not understand a word. She seemed to speak English, but she swallowed some sounds and shortened others, so I could not comprehend anything. I got used to the Australian English later on, but not right away. My beach plans did not work out either. When we got to Australia, the weather was much warmer than at home, but the ocean was still cold. So I had nothing to do but watch the surfers in their tight wetsuits. And it was very entertaining before I noticed a fin sticking up from the water near them, and nobody seemed to be paying attention to it. I rushed to the lifeguard, pointing it out with my hand stretched and yelling, "There's a shark out there!" But he only smiled and said that I had a real sharp eye if I could see such a small and not really dangerous shark. I was so embarrassed. I returned to my beach chair and buried myself in a book. And you know what? I got sunburned. If you're ever planning to go to Australia, you should remember that the sun is very strong over there. Even when I was at home in Australia, there was never a dull moment. One morning, I woke up to this deafening and horrible laughing sound coming from the outside of my window. I looked at my watch. It was 5 a.m. I was so mad that I did not even think about whether it could be dangerous. All I wanted to do was tell this joker what I thought about his stupid jokes. I opened the curtains, and what did I see? Nobody. Just a pretty bird with a big head and a long beak sitting on my windowsill. But when it opened its beak, I heard this infernal sound again. I tried to chase the bird away, but it was useless. It just went on roaring with this terrible laughter. I moaned and went to make coffee. It seemed that a kookaburra came scouting and gave a sign to his friends. Unusual guests began to drop in at my house. Another day, I was returning home on a bike and entered the yard through a gate that was left open. Before that day, I couldn't get used to seeing fences around houses, and I couldn't figure out what they were needed for. But at that moment, I understood. There was an enormous scaly creature sitting on the terrace. I took a couple of steps towards this dragon that was obstructing my entrance into the house, and he opened his maw wide. I tried to chase it away, flourishing my arms and yelling, "Shoo, shoo!" And the beast moved towards me. I jumped back in a panic and then remembered that I could ask for help. I yelled, "Courtney!" hoping that my neighbor would come and rescue me. But my rescue did not happen the way I expected it to. A guy who looked to be about 23 years old dashingly jumped over the fence. Quickly judging the situation, he brusquely grabbed the beast's tail. In 1 second, he lifted it in the air, getting a grip of the beast's neck with his other hand, and as he tightly held the wiggling dragon, he turned to me and smiled brilliantly. Oh my gosh. You see, when my dad told me about someone named Courtney, I imagined a middle-aged woman in an Australian digger hat, not a suntanned, handsome guy with bright blue eyes, who cheerfully told me something that I did not understand. She'll be right, and left my yard with the beast in his hands, closing the gate with his leg. But there was nothing right in that. My nose was still peeling from the sunburn, and I was totally unprepared to meet this Courtney. I was very embarrassed when this happened, but soon I had to ask for Courtney's help again when I saw a spider in my house. Generally, I am not afraid of spiders, but this one was way too big. I looked in the mirror first and then called Courtney. He came down a couple minutes later and said, "Let's have a squiz." And while I was trying to figure out what kind of quiz we were going to have, he caught the intruder in a plastic bucket and threw it away. After that, we stood on the terrace, and Courtney told me that the danger of Australian spiders is pretty exaggerated outside of Australia, and that they did not really kill spiders. But there were a couple of species that it's better to stay away from. I was listening to Courtney with complete focus, but frankly speaking, I did not care what he was talking about, spiders or quantum physics. So I learned to catch big, but not dangerous, spiders. And I had to do it more often than was normal, even for Australia. It's all because this year's summer was abnormally hot. Some days were hotter than 120 degrees. People and animals, and even eight-legged guys, all suffered. I saw a video on the internet about how a large spider was sitting on the hand of an Australian woman holding a bottle of water. And I realized that they were trying to move to some place that was cold and wet. I remembered how we made feeders for birds at home in the winter, and I decided to make a water bowl for spiders suffering from heat and thirst. Hey, they're also living creatures, despite the fact that they're creepy and have 8 legs. So I made a water bowl under a tent in my backyard and made sure that there was always water in there. Well, I've shared my adventures in Australia with you. I'm very sad that soon I will have to leave. It's a wonderful country where wonderful creatures live, and people don't walk upside down, but are usually very friendly and helpful. And you know, when I turn 18, I will come back here to go to college and to invite Courtney on a date. What are your favorite countries? Or maybe you have your own interesting stories about traveling. Share them in the comments and do not forget to like my story.